It is no secret that Demacia isn't doing too well currently. There is a criminal on the loose, there is a civil war ongoing, and the king literally just died. And as all of this was happening, it was really cool to see how all the characters involved get a lot of new lore. But there was always one exception. Despite her being one of the most trusted generals Jarvan has, Shyvana was nowhere to be found. And so we just wondered where could she be all this time. Well, with the new cards in Legends of Runeterra, we got at least some answers. So because the new draconic lore is quite cool, and because it's been a while since we have talked about Shyvana, I decided to have a look at her again and talk about her story up to date. So without further ado, let's super quickly go through her bio before we have a look at the story in the new cards. Long after the fall of the Shuriman Empire, underneath a lost volcano, the elder beast known as Yiva guarded her eggs. At this time, dragon eggs were incredibly rare and were considered priceless. So there were some foolish mortals who tried to steal them, but all of them just became an easy feast for Yiva. Eventually, however, one of these thieves succeeded. They stole one of Yiva's eggs, and against all odds, they reached the coasts and escaped. The thief was a mage who traveled north to Piltover, where, before he was even able to find a buyer, the egg hatched. The mage didn't know how this happened. Perhaps it was because they removed the egg from its nest, or perhaps it happened because the seasons just shifted. But somehow, instead of a dragon, what emerged from the egg was a humanoid baby with pale violet skin. The mage couldn't abandon her, so he raised the child as his own, naming her Shyvana, after the dark legend of her broodmother. Now, trying to live a normal life with a child that can shift into a dragon was difficult. But things became worse when the mage realized that somehow Yiva retained connection with her lost daughter. And after her other offspring took flight, Yiva left her empty nest and soared over the ocean in search for Shyvana. By the way, since Yiva waited for another offspring to hatch, it means that technically Shyvana has a sibling somewhere in the world. Anyway, as Yiva soared across the lands, Shyvana and the mage tried to hide in a ruined farmhouse, but it didn't take long for Yiva to find them and to set the mage on fire. After that, Shyvana buried her adoptive father beneath a spreading oak, and she continued her escape alone. After weeks of traveling and hiding in the wilds, Shyvana stumbled upon a wounded warrior, who turned out to be Prince Jarvan. Jarvan got here after his squad was defeated by a Noxian warband, but that's another story. After finding him, Shyvana shifted into her dragon form, despite Yiva still looking for her, and she carried Jarvan all the way back to the Demacian borders. Of course, from Jarvan's point of view, he was unconscious the whole time, so he had no idea how this woman managed to carry him all the way back. But regardless, they ended up near Renwall. There, the other Demacians regarded Shyvana's violet skin and strange manners with suspicion, but still she was made welcome. In fact, her time in the town was the most peaceful she had ever known. But this peace would not last, because Shyvana sensed that Yiva was coming. In preparation for the upcoming battle, Jarvan brought all the terrified locals inside the main stronghold, and there he noticed that Shyvana was getting ready to escape. That's when Shyvana admitted that the reason why she wanted to run was because the approaching dragon was her own mother, and Shyvana didn't want innocent people to die because of her. However, she did save Jarvan's life, so Jarvan knew it was only right to fight by her side. Moved by his offer, Shyvana accepted. As Yiva came into view, the Demacian archers loosed volleys of arrows to keep her distracted. In return, Yiva set the battlements on fire and tore the walls down. Then Shyvana leapt forward, transforming into a dragon, and challenging her broodmother head-on. After a long fight, Shyvana stood victorious after breaking her mother's neck on the flagstones. Later, Jarvan honored Shyvana's bravery, and he promised her that she would always have a place at his side if she returned with him back to Demacia. And so, with Yiva's skull as a proof of their triumph, they journeyed back to the capital city. There, despite the Demacians' hatred towards magic, while she has found a measure of acceptance as one of the prince's most trusted guardians, she is left to wonder whether that would still be the case if her true nature were more widely known. Now that's where her bio ends. But from Lux's comic, you may remember that Shyvana simply wasn't there, despite this bio mentioning that Shyvana and Jarvan traveled back to the capital city. In fact, the only mention of Shyvana we have in the comic is the part where Jarvan mentioned that he once loved someone who was magical. And I do believe that he is referring to Shyvana. So yes, feel free to ship those two. But other than that, Shyvana was missing, so you may be asking, where was she? Well, Legends of Runeterra at least partially answers that. Since Shyvana became a new champion card, she also got more cards that support her place in Demacia. So let's have a look at what is going on here. Shyvana's description here is a page from Lieutenant Jarik's account on Renwall. Of course, Renwall is where Shyvana fought Yiva, so this is what the journal says. On the one hand, she is, by her very nature, our most hated foe, her kind having historically brought only anguish to Demacia. On the other side, she is trusted by the prince, and seems to have all the makings of a determined soldier and valuable ally. I only hope she does not betray the trust we have placed in her. And here, in the art, I do believe that we can see Renwall. This is probably the stronghold because, as you'll see, the people here know Shyvana very well. In her dragon form, we get another page from Lieutenant Jarik's account on Renwall. The first time I witnessed her transformation, I beheld her with revulsion. There was Yiva, replete in fire and fury. If only I had known what I know now, that she would become our sister in arms, an exemplary soldier, and my dear, dear friend. Now once again, since this is mentioning Shyvana's fight against Yiva, I do believe that's what this art is depicting. This might be the actual fight with her broodmother. But there is also the chance that this might be depicting a different fight, but we'll get to that in a moment. Then there is also the Confront card, which is just referencing Shyvana confronting her mother, and her draconic kind. And then there is Strafing Strike. When Knight and Dragon separated, panting and wounded, the latter seemed reinvigorated. It smelled blood and was eager for more. Now the dragon shown here doesn't have any specific marks, so this is likely just a random infernal dragon. But then we have DRAGONGUARD Lieutenant, and this is Lieutenant Jarik. At least we know that because in the files, that's what this card was called. And interestingly, this person is so close to Shyvana that he even calls her by her nickname, Anna.
I found a home among the Dragon Guard.
We are your people, Anna, and you ours.
The description says, when I lost my comrades in arms at Renwall, I thought I had also lost my resolve, but it turns out there is nothing that a fight can't stir up in an old soldier. Here I quickly want to mention how much I love the draconic armor. I believe that this is not patricide, which would make sense because these people are fighting besides Shyvana. So if they wore pure Demacian steel, they would also dampen the magic of Shyvana. And by the way, since Shyvana is likely wearing the same kind of armor, of course she wouldn't be wearing patricide either. But now, looking at the background here, once again, if this is Renwall, this might be just picturing that one battle with Yiva. But since the voice lines of these cards reveal that these people fight a lot of different dragons, I think that these soldiers are like the watchers on the wall, except these people hold back the dragons. So, if Shyvana isn't currently in the capital city of Demacia, it would make sense for her to stay here, because normal Demacians won't even come anywhere close to this area. Why would they? It is filled with dragons. So, if only the locals stay here, and the locals already know Shyvana, that would mean that this would be a safe place for Shyvana to stay. However, none of this is actually mentioned in her bio. So now I wonder if Shyvana is still in the capital city, somehow, somewhere, or if she is near the borders of Demacia, because that would actually make sense and it would fit these cards. But we get more info on this as we go into the other cards. Then there is Egghead Researcher, whose name is Anden Main, and the description are his notes. The dragon egg he is studying belongs to the Screeching dragon, also known under its scientific name, Draco Murmurationis. Location, recovered by researcher Anden Main on expedition. Notes, gestation period unknown, incubation continued. Recent movement observed within shell. Egg responds to heat, light, hammer. Current studies inconclusive. So as you can see, among these watchers on the wall, we also have a man who researches the dragons, which likely greatly helps them in the fight against the dragons. Then there is the card called SHARPSIGHT. We know that the person shown here is Yesenia. She will appear later, but here the description says, Any who would dare breach Demasia's walls will find full company awaiting them, forewarned and heavily armored. This once again confirms that these people are near the borders of Demacia. So if Shyvana is with them, it confirms that's where Shyvana is. Now randomly with all these dragons we also got this card and I quickly want to mention it. It's really just a person who's shaping Patricide into statues. But it made me realize, I have never seen a badger in Demacia. Then there is the Screeching Dragon, which was mentioned in the researcher's notes. Because yes, this is the egg he is researching. The description says, all creatures are fiercely protective of their young, but few are as well equipped to deal with would-be threats as dragons. Now here I need to mention that this researcher doesn't actually hate dragons. He's just interested in them. And he does mention that in his voice lines in the game.
Where's your compassion? Dragons are simply misunderstood.
Oh? Where was the compassionate Renwall?
And then we have DRAGONGUARD Lookout, picturing Endon and Yesenia. There in the distance, is that? Looks like it. How can you be sure? Oh, there's no mistaking them. Cover your ears, this will be loud. Of course, she's talking about dragons approaching, which is funny because in her voice lines she only mentions finding birds.
What do you see, Yesenia?
Birds, clouds, more birds.
However, the description mentions that this is Endon and Yesenia talking. And Endon is the researcher. So although it is highly unlikely, I do imagine that this armored warrior standing beside her, in the cart with this description, is actually Endon. It's not him, but it will be really cool. Then there is Stalking Broodmother. And interestingly, this takes place somewhere else in Demacia. Looking at the armor, this is not in the mountains. However, we still have Endon Main talking about the situation. So perhaps he's been dealing with dragons in more places than just the borders of Demacia. Careful, soldiers. If we tread carefully and don't disturb the nest, we can keep the mother dragon on the defensive. If we rile her up any further, well, you'll want to be ready to run. So here, in the art, we can see that Demacian soldiers found a dragon nest, the mother returned, but she's not attacking them. She is just waiting for the Demacians to approach, because she wants to protect her children, whom you can see inside the tree. And finally, there is KADREGRIN the Infernal. When Demacia underwent a sudden spate of dragon attacks, Shyvana knew that KADREGRIN the Infernal was to blame. Other dragons, inspired by his bold nature and powerful flame, drove the Demacians to fear. Now, Shyvana has a couple of voice lines against him, and the way she's talking to him, it makes me feel like there is the slightest chance that this might actually be Shyvana's sibling. You know, the one mentioned in the bio.
Your claws are weak, KADREGRIN. Your fire is futile, KADREGRIN.
Speaking of which, since most of these dragons have actual names, going back to the Screeching Dragon, if you listen to Shyvana's voice, you may also learn that dragon's name.
I will show you no mercy, Sevros.
But that is going to be it for Shyvana and the dragons of Demacia. Interestingly, looking back at the cinematic with Garen and Fiora, the dragon there doesn't quite fit any of the dragons shown here. KADREGRIN nor the Screeching Dragon actually fit the looks of that one. However, together with all the Targonian dragons rising up for no reason at all, I wonder if we are going to see more dragons on Runeterra in general. Right now there are only 3 places with dragons that we know about. Ixtal with its elemental dragons, Demacia with its dragons attacking Renwall, and Targon with its space dragons. But that's really it. So the one most important thing to take away from this is that yes, feel free to ship them.